Hello and welcome to today's ExchangeWire interview. I am delighted to be joined today by someone who needs very little introduction in the CTV ad tech sphere. However, I'm going to give him three. You might know him as Paul Gubbins, you might know him as Paul Gubbins, or you might know him as Gubbins. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, you're very welcome to be here. I'm delighted to have you. So you have recently left your role at Publica.
Correct.
You're a free agent now, so we can get you on and have a good open discussion around the CTV area.
Absolutely.
And it's a hot topic this year. It's a big one. 56% of the ExchangeWire audience have decided it would be the hottest trend of 2024 earlier in the year. I'm going to start by asking you how you see it playing out in the next few years. It's such a rich, interesting area.
That is a very big question.
It is.
Listen, I think you only have to look at your own habits and the habits of friends and family and all of the data from the various different reports that illustrate TV audiences don't really want to pay for their television content anymore. Yes, they're happy to pay for sports, but sports aside, when it comes to TV shows and movies, for instance, many audience now proactively leaning into AVOD or fast services. And that's due to the rising cost of living, SVOD fatigue. Many houses just can't afford to sustain 10 plus different subscription services every month. Hence the reason we've seen so many people leaning into those ad-supported streaming services for their TV content.
Yeah, and it's, like you say, it's become a fragmented ecosystem already in CTV, and people are choosing accordingly which ones are of value to them. In terms of advertising, how do you feel like the major streaming services adoption of advertising layers has played out, and how do you see that working out as well in the long term?
I think it's growing very, very quickly. So most of the tier one subscription services now have some type of ad-supported capability, be that an AVOD component or a free ad-supported streaming television, i.e. fast offering. And again, I think they've been quick to realise that to retain audiences and to grow their user base, they have to offer an alternative to that subscription model. So there's several strands of CTV inventory that are really growing in Europe at the moment. And if we look specifically at the UK, the first is from the broadcasters, and they've launched their BVOD services, so that's broadcaster video on demand. And that inventory still looks and feels like traditional linear TV inventory. It's all of their premium shows. It's measured via Barb, who are the third party that measure TV audiences. And advertisers are very much leaning into that, but it's the types of advertisers that historically have been very present in traditional linear TV. And the reason they're leaning into BVOD first is because, again, it looks and feels very similar to what they've been used to yesteryear. The other type of streaming inventory that's growing very, very quickly is from fast services. Now, the biggest fast offerings in the UK at the moment are really coming from the TV manufacturers themselves. So people like Samsung and LG, they've got a very large list of free channels. So when you turn on those televisions, they have an EPG, which is effectively an electronic programming guide. Yeah. So the digital version maybe to what we might have been used to in the UK if we ever bought the TV Times, for instance. Yeah. And then the third type of inventory that's going quickly is the AVOD inventory, and AVOD is predominantly coming from the likes of YouTube and other big US streaming services that are now launching in the UK to make their inventory available. An example there would be something like Tubi. They recently launched in the UK, I think, with a catalogue of over 20,000 different shows and movies that are available to watch on demand. So again, to summarise, it's either the broadcasters that are really invested in their BVOD offerings, like ITVX, for instance, from ITV. It's the fast services that are predominantly coming from the TV OEMs themselves that are launching those advertising businesses, or it's the AVOD apps that are now discoverable to CTV users via the app stores on those televisions themselves.
Yeah, it's the landscape's changing and it's really interesting. I want to pick up on what you mentioned about linear, and I want to dive a little bit into the slow death of linear TV. We keep hearing it's on its way out, but it's death by a million cuts, it feels. But one of the major steps, I think, towards linear being moved slowly towards the door is that recreation almost of the linear experience through the streaming services. Yep. Have you seen that progress, and do you think that's a way forward? And do you think linear is on its end?
No. So it's a really good point, actually, and it's something that I've tried to write about previously. Linear is the way that it's a delivery method, and linear in CTV is actually one of the fastest growing areas of CTV, and what I mean by linear CTV is effectively fast. Yeah. Again, it's scheduled TV content that's delivered around that electronic programming guide. So when we talk about linear, We're just talking about a delivery method. So I think the industry needs to be really mindful that when they say linear is dying, in reality it's not. It's one of the fastest growing areas of CTV. What is effectively dying out is traditional broadcast signals. So those signals are no longer reaching the household via aerials that are attached to roofs, but increasingly via the household internet. So that type of television distribution is slowly dying out because of the rise of connected televisions, but linear content delivery is still very much alive. It's the way that many audiences like to discover TV content, and as we've seen, FAST is growing very, very quickly across the globe, predominantly being driven by innovation from those TV OEMs that have launched their own proprietary advertising businesses.
It's really interesting, and I will be careful of my terminology going forward on linear and traditional.
I'm sure somebody else would say, Paul, that's actually not correct. Just my personal opinion. I refer to as linear, just delivered in a scheduled way around a TV guide, for instance.
And that makes perfect sense, and it's what I was hinting towards in terms of how traditional will be moved out. It's people who maybe streaming services going through an app. It's unfamiliar, a bit strange, but when they get in there, there is the familiar old experience of the EPG, of shifting to the channels.
Absolutely.
And a lot of what we've talked about with the adoption of CTV and the end of traditional TV has been like, not everyone is here, not everyone is in ad tech, not everyone is forward-thinking adopters. There is the rest of the country. Their traditional experience of TV it's not being disrupted, it's being recreated now, which is helping the ad money come in and the ad spend grow in it.
Absolutely. And if you look at younger audiences, they want their content now. Many younger demographics have been raised around social media, and that concept of scrolling and that concept of a immediate delivery of something that they're interested in. So watching scheduled content might not necessarily be for them, hence the reason that AVOD is growing so quickly in the TV space, and it's so popular with younger TV viewers.
Yeah, it's so interesting how the different demographics approach it as well. From the advertiser standpoint, who do you think are the power players here? Who are the platforms? Where's the money going, in your opinion? Who's doing it well as well? Who provides a good ad experience?
So if you look at the advertisers, again, there's two types of advertisers. There are advertisers that have been traditional linear TV advertisers that need certain types of measurement, that need certain types of confidence around the environments that they're serving their ads into. And they're the types of ad buyers and advertisers that are still leaning into BVOD because, again, BVOD looks and feels like traditional broadcast television. The other type of advertisers are digital-first advertisers, those that have been used to using data and programmatic technology to target users in mobile and desktop environments. They're the types of advertisers that are leaning into CTV probably a little bit quicker than traditional broadcast advertisers because they're used to using a demand-side platform that connects to a supply-side platform that then has a multitude of different apps that they're monetizing for. So to answer your question, the two types of advertisers, you're either a traditional TV advertiser that needs certain measurement and you need certain things before you have the confidence to run a TV campaign. And then you've got the other segment that's growing much quicker. You've got social advertisers, digital advertisers, local advertisers that are leaning into AVOD and FAST super quickly because they understand the value that can be extracted from DSPs and SSPs and targeting audiences in a programmatic way. It's something they've done very well in desktop and mobile, but now they get to do it on the biggest screen in the household. So that's what's really exciting advertisers. When it comes to who's doing CTV advertising well, there's a bunch of really good streaming services in the UK now. I won't name all of them, but the TV manufacturers are doing great things. The AVOD apps are doing great things. And if you look at the infrastructure, the programmatic infrastructure that supports that, again, all of the tier one demand side platforms, the tier one SSPs, the big ad servers that have been built specifically for streaming, they're all adding a huge amount of value now, either to those on the sell side that are trying to build ad breaks, or to those on the buy side that want to target audiences in streaming environments.
Yeah, it's, the choice is there, and we won't name them, but the players are doing it well and attracting that ad spend, and it's growing, and it's interesting to see how the results coming out from the major streamers are shifting after the introduction of ad streaming platforms. Do you feel that the advertising on CTV is innovative enough? Do you think that's an area that can really be explored? We see, it's pre-roll, mid-roll stuff. Like, how do you think that will develop as the adoption grows?
So I think there's going to be a lot more interactivity and shoppability that's eventually built into the CTV ads. So, CTV isn't necessarily reinventing the wheel. It's television advertising. It's the sight, sound and motion that marketers love about the biggest screen in the household, but increasingly it's coupled with the precision of digital targeting. And with that precision, that's where those on the buy side and those on the sell side will want to introduce shoppability into the ad creatives. If we look at the convergence of retail media and the CTV, we're already seeing that evolve in the US with big retailers buying OEMs because they realise that the television is effectively the biggest shop window in somebody's household. So I think with all of the data that's now available via streaming services, smart publishers will start to build in those capabilities into their offering to attract the types of advertisers that want to basically, offer up their services in a way that can be transacted upon while somebody's actually viewing, a show, for instance.
Interesting. So, it could be the next bastion of retail media. It could come through CTV, a bit of convergence there,
Absolutely.
maybe.
And I think we're already seeing those trends in the US, and I think we'll continue to see that in Europe. The broader question then is, well, who actually owns attribution? What does that look like? At the moment, it's still very much around QR codes. That model works well, but I don't know if it's the best that we can develop as an industry. But it is a debate that I think we'll hear at ExchangeWire events and many other events over the next several years. Who owns attribution? Is it the TV manufacturer? Is it the operating system within the TV? Is it somebody's smartphone? Is it somebody's smart speaker? We know the capabilities exist, but in the same way that everybody chased last click in the digital world, what might that look like in the CTV space?
Interesting. I'd be very keen to see how it all plays out on the retail front as much as anything.
Absolutely.
Obviously, Amazon have their Prime service and an advantage there, given that they have a retail giant behind it as well.
I think Amazon extremely well placed in the CTV ecosystem. To your point, coupled with retail data, all of the shows that they now have, I think they will do very well, as will many other big US streaming services.
Yeah. Do you class YouTube as CTV, and is this the platform that everyone's competing with?
That is a really good question. That wasn't in our pre-approved question.
No, I thought I'd get your insight.
So most people actually disagree with me. Well, many do, but I absolutely think YouTube is television content. And the reason I say that, I watch a lot of YouTube on my television, mostly old Oasis clips or car clips, whatever it may be. But I'm proactively searching for that content. I'm watching it on the biggest screen in the household. I'm then leant forward and engaged with that content. So why would that not be TV content? Just because it's produced by an influencer, for instance, it's still professionally produced. They're using professional equipment to record those videos. So I don't deem that any less valuable than something that I'd watch from a broadcaster, for instance. But I guess it's less about what I perceive to be as TV content, and I guess more around what does the advertiser actually perceive TV content to be, right? But I think we're going to see a seismic shift over the next several years around how people perceive television and how those on the buy side actually value what's being watched in front of the glass as well.
Excellent. I've chucked that question at you without warning.
I mean, what do you think?
I think it's TV, totally.
Okay.
I think YouTube is the biggest competition for most of the streaming giants, most of the BVOD services.
Yep.
I think YouTube is the competition, and I would certainly class it as TV. Like you say, it's on the big screen in front of you.
Yeah.
You can watch your highlights, your clips, but it's television, and I would agree with you totally on it.
Because you could have somebody, right? You could have an influencer on a social platform that has millions and millions of followers. Now, if they surface their content via YouTube and it's available on the biggest screen, their audiences are going to engage with that content like it's television content.
Yeah,
it's just a question of, again, how is that perceived on the buy side?
Exactly, and I use, same as you, I use YouTube more as a television thing than I do a phone thing. It's a more natural habitat for
you
it.
Watching Oasis videos as well?
Not Oasis, but yes, more old sports clips, actually, old NBA clips. But no, Paul, thanks so much for your time. I've really appreciated it, and really great to chat to you about the CTV landscape. Looking forward to hearing much more from you in future.
Likewise, really enjoyed that. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, mate. Cheers.